Hello, friends. Welcome to National Engineers Week. We at the Boston Children's Museum love celebrating eWeek. It's a lot of fun, and we get to work with real engineers and engineering students. This year, of course, we have to do everything online. But that's okay, it'll still be fun. Today, we're going to meet a real engineer named Maddie, and she's going to help us learn all about what it's really like to be an engineer. My name is Alyssa, and I am the Science Program Manager at the Boston Children's Museum, and I have a guest with me today. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name is Maddie Schwartz, and I'm a software engineer at Viasat, which is a satellite internet company.
Okay, so I know that most engineers work on things that I can actually go up and touch. Like a civil engineer builds a bridge, and a chemical engineer makes chemicals, but I can't touch what a software engineer does. So what is it that you do?
So, a software engineer programs or writes code for a computer. Code is a set of instructions for the computer to follow. You could tell the computer to add two numbers, to go to a website, or to draw a star on a video game. Most interactions people have with a computer has been programmed by a software engineer.
Cool. Okay. So, what were your favorite subjects in school?
I had a lot of favorite subjects. I really loved math and history, though. I loved solving problems and learning about other people's lives and the communities they lived in.
And did you always know that you wanted to be a software engineer, or did that come later?
No, that came later. Um, I studied computer science and political science in college because I enjoyed solving um, math problems and social problems. And I wanted to be a software engineer to see if I could try to do both in one job.
And have you found that?
It remains to be seen, but at Viasat, we want to provide internet to everybody across the world, whether you're living in a big city or in a small town or a rural community. And I think it's really important that everybody has access to the same information and opportunities. And the internet is a big part of that.
So, when we do engineering activities at the museum with kids, two of the things that we run into a lot are they really want to work by themselves. They don't want to work with their brothers and sisters. And they get really frustrated if the thing they're working on doesn't work right away. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Do you work by yourself, or do you work with other people? And does everything, now that you've gone to school and learned everything, did it all just work for you right off the bat?
So, software engineering often involves working with other people. Imagine like building your favorite website or app all by yourself. That would be really hard and take a long time. So, it's important to work with other people so you can divide up all the tasks that it takes to solve your problem and work on it together. And then when you get stuck and you get frustrated and you don't know what to do, you have your teammates to rely on and to ask questions.
I know I like working better when I have a team for exactly that reason. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. And so I can bounce ideas off other people.
Mhm.
What is
Yeah.
your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of my job is seeing other people use software that I've made. Um, it feels really great to know that something I've made is helping other people out and making their lives a little bit easier.
Cool. Do you have maybe some show and tell stuff that you can show us to tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so I have a picture of a satellite that my company has worked on and some of my code interacts with. I can't show you in person because it's all the way up in space, but I'll share my screen to show you a picture of it. So this is the KA-SAT satellite, and it is providing internet coverage for much of Europe. But we also have satellites that cover the United States and Mexico and parts of Latin America as well.
So did your company put that satellite up in space?
It did.
How did it do that?
I am not the one in charge of sending satellites to space, but um, there is a lot of technology that is built by other types of engineers that send it off into space. Most of the stuff I work on involves talking to this satellite, though.
And how does that happen? How do you in Boston, typing at your computer, talk to a satellite that's hundreds and hundreds of feet up in the air?
Well, it's very similar how the satellite talks to people in their homes reaching the internet. So there are radio waves, little waves that you can't really see that travel through the air, and they reach people in their homes with messages. They're kind of secret and hidden, so it's really cool when you do end up getting it in your home.
That is cool. So, are there other companies that have satellites up in space?
There's lots of other companies who have satellites as well. There are also different types of internet too. So you can get internet through a cable that is buried underground and reaches your home. And those are very common in densely populated areas such as cities. But if you don't live in a big city, you might not have access to that type of internet. And so that is the benefit of having a satellite, is that it can reach many people across many different areas.
And that must be really important right now with the pandemic going on because everybody's working from home and all the kids are going to school from home. So everybody really needs to have access to the internet so they can do their jobs and do their schoolwork.
Definitely.
That's cool. So, at the museum, we define engineering as using stuff to build stuff that does stuff. How do you use stuff that builds to build stuff that does stuff?
Sure. So this might seem a little circular, but I use a computer to write software that a computer uses. So the computer is on both ends of the thing that I built. Um, there once was people who had to write software um, without a computer, though. Um, a couple decades ago, you were writing code on pieces of paper and punching holes in it. So that's how software used to be made.
Wow. That must have taken forever.
Yeah, and it was really hard to figure out what the problems were if you had a bug in your code. That's what we call a problem. You call it a bug, and you want to try to exterminate as many as you can. But it's a lot easier to be a software engineer now that we can code on a computer.
So when you code, like you said earlier that a software engineer would write the code that makes a star show up on your video game, for example.
Mhm.
What does the code look like? Do you just write, put a star here? And what does it look like? If I were looking over your shoulder at work, what would I see?
So you would see a function. And so most code is broken up into functions. And it is basically a command that you can give details to. So you can say, write a star. Maybe that is the name of your function. And you need to tell it, where do you want to write it? What color do you want it to be? And how big is it? So you have to tell this function different things about the star that you want.
So if I just said write a star, it wouldn't really know what to do.
Not quite. Maybe there is a function out there that would write one particular star, but maybe you want more control over it.
That's a lot of detail.
But it gives you a lot of flexibility to be creative and build whatever you want.
I know there's a lot of toys and things out there to help teach kids coding, and there's also things like Scratch. Have
hmm
you ever played around with Scratch or Scratch Junior?
I haven't used Scratch myself, but I've seen my sister animate a video with Scratch, and she had a lot of fun.
So if a kid wants to be a software engineer, and of course we know that like all your school subjects are important, you don't want to ignore one instead of, just focus on another. What are some of the areas that kids should pay a little special attention to if they want to go into software engineering?
I would say that math is a really important subject if you want to be a software engineer. A lot of the math problems you solve are similar to computer problems. However, there are most of the computer problems out there have been solved, and sometimes you need to learn from other people as well. And being able to communicate your solutions to problems is also really important. So I think English or literature um, is also an important subject to focus on as well.
So just being able to communicate really clearly.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty important. So something else that we say about engineers is that they help to solve a problem. And it might not be like a huge problem like getting a star in your video game, but it's solving a problem. And you said a little bit about this earlier. How do you help solve problems?
The problems that I solve at work involve making the internet faster and reach more people so that everybody can be connected. We want to have satellites that cover the entire world. Right now, we only have satellites that cover Europe and North America and parts of Latin America right now.
So if I send an email to somebody in France, it goes through a satellite.
Hmm.
How fast does it get there?
It takes a little bit of time for your message to reach the satellite and then come back down to your friend in France. And that is called a latency. And so that latency for satellites is about 2 seconds.
Oh, when you said it takes a little time, I thought you were going to tell me that, it could take like an hour.
No,
You know,
just a second or two.
that's amazing. So if I type something right now to somebody that I know in France, they'll have it like basically right away.
Yep.
That's really cool. That must be really fun just to know that you're doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love space, and I think it's really exciting to think about how I'm interacting with something so far up there and beyond my point of view right now.
So you said before that like even 20, 30 years ago, software engineering was very different from the
Hmm.
kind of stuff that you do now. What do you think it's going to look like 20 years from now?
The software I write right now is built on other people's software. And so people keep building on different software every year, every 5 years. And so I think software engineering will become easier because we will be building on what we're working on right now.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
Here you are. This is your first real job as a software engineer.
Hmm.
What were some challenges you ran into getting to this point?
Sure. So, my biggest challenge to being a software engineer was some low confidence in myself. I often felt I didn't belong as an engineer because I didn't fill all my time with math and science. I wanted to take classes in history and in art. Um, and some of my peers just loved math so much that was all they really wanted to spend their time with. And you might have heard me mention how I thought English was an important subject. And that is because I learned that these interests in other subjects didn't make me a weaker engineer, they just made me different. And having diverse experiences and knowledge on a team makes it stronger. And I'm happy to be working with people who value my differences.
There's definitely that stereotype of the nerdy engineer who doesn't have any social skills and doesn't know how to talk about anything other than engineering.
Definitely. But I I love reading fantasy books. I love cooking. I love biking and going on hikes and sometimes painting too. I think I have a lot of interests and that might not fit into the stereotypical software engineer.
Well, that gets to my last question, which is, when you're not at work doing engineering, like what do you like to do for fun?
I love to read.
Me
I
too.
just I just finished a a fantasy series that just whisks me away to another world filled with magic and adventure, and I love that escape. Um, my first fantasy series that I read growing up was Harry Potter,
Of
and
course.
it holds a special place in my heart. Um, I still daydream about getting my first wand from Ollivanders and flying across Boston in a broomstick. Um, so fantasy books are definitely one of my favorite pastimes.
I read all kinds of books myself, so I totally get where you're coming from.
Mhm.
All right. Do you think we missed anything? Is there anything else you want to share about life as a software engineer?
I don't think so. Do you have any other questions for me?
I don't think I do. I think you covered it all, and I have a better understanding now of what a software engineer does
Mhm.
and the kinds of things that you do to sort of help people in the rest of the world get the information they need.
Great. I'm
That's
happy
awesome.
I could help and hopefully inspire some future software engineers.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.